You think you are completely in control of your own mind. You think you make your own choices every single day. You are wrong. The truth is, 6 powerful psychological tricks are quietly pulling the strings behind your back. These tactics are so dangerous they should be illegal, and they are controlling everything from your wallet to your behavior. Tactic number 1 is the identity cage. You believe you are negotiating based on independent thinking. Wrong again. You are actually walking straight into a mental cage that someone else designed for you, and you don't even know it. An invisible identity crisis is happening right under your nose, and your rational mind cannot detect it. The scariest part is that your brain would rather take a massive financial hit than face the collapse of your own self-image. 95% of failed negotiations are not about price. They fail because of an invisible identity crisis. Even in America, where personal freedom is gold, a shocking paradox happens every day. 99% of human choices do not come from independent thought. They come from the pressure to match the label you put on yourself. Think about why someone would willingly pay 10 times more for a product that does the exact same thing. The answer is not about utility, it's about a psychological trap called labeling. Humans have a primal fear that is way bigger than losing money, and that's the fear of looking like a hypocrite to themselves. To understand this, we have to look at human behavior through cognitive dissonance. In the classic book Influence by Robert Cialdini, the principle of commitment and consistency proves a powerful point. Once you publicly claim an identity, your brain triggers a defense mechanism to protect that identity at all costs. Morgan Housel also noted in The Psychology of Money that people do not run on pure logic. They run on stories they tell themselves to protect their ego. When you try to persuade someone with cold facts, you are fighting their entire defense system. But if you reshape how they see themselves before you ask for anything, they will willingly open the gates for you. James Clear analyzed this deeply in Atomic Habits, showing that the deepest change is not about results, it's about identity. Your brain would rather lose money or material things than face the destruction of the belief system you broadcasted to the world. Here's the first breakthrough insight that most people miss. Persuasion is not about changing someone else's mind, it's the art of locking them into their own ego. You don't need to bend their will. Your job is to build a cage out of the very traits they're proud of, and then invite them inside. This creates a perfect labeling process without leaving a single trace of manipulation. The process starts by breaking down their psychology to find the exact trait you need for the deal, whether it's generosity, decisiveness, or innovation. Think of it like casting a perfect mold before pouring the concrete. Once you identify that target trait, don't make your offer right away. Instead, drop a psychological anchor with a framing question. Ask them if they see themselves as a forward-thinking leader who welcomes big challenges and breakthroughs. When you say this, they have only one choice to protect their high-status image, and that's to nod and say yes. The moment they say yes, the trap snaps shut. Now you officially drop your real proposal. If they say no, that refusal completely shatters the proud label they just pinned to their chest. They fall into extreme cognitive dissonance, and to escape that mental torture, they're forced to agree with you. This leads to a second paradoxical truth. Giving someone the freedom to validate themselves is actually the fastest way to strip away their power to say no. When you give them a chance to feel proud, you take away their only weapon in the negotiation. Look at how this plays out in high-ticket sales. Before dropping a massive price tag that puts clients on defense, top-tier salespeople never ramble about product features. Instead, they look the client dead in the eye and ask a subtle question. They ask if the client is the type of person who always prioritizes the absolute best quality and safety for their family. Under the weight of pride and the protector instinct, the client will say yes. When the heavy price tag follows right after, they have nowhere to run. Complaining about the price or walking away would mean they don't actually care for their family like they just claimed. In short, the ultimate weapon in communication is not what you say, it's who you make them admit they are. Don't try to change their decision, change the identity that drives the decision. Here's your homework for the next 24 hours. Pick a partner, a coworker, or a client you need to ask for something. Stop prepping your logical arguments. Instead, write down a single identity question based on the trait you need from them. Apply the 3-step framework you just learned and watch them willingly step into the cage they built themselves. Locking someone into an identity cage is just the warm-up. This second tactic is even more brutal because it doesn't attack the ego, it hacks exactly how your brain looks at money. Tactic number 2 is the decoy anchor system. You think you buy luxury items or sign contracts based on your bank balance and actual needs. You are wrong. The truth is, the decoy anchor system and relative pricing are running your wallet. After hundreds of hours studying behavioral economics and finance, I found a chilling truth. Customers never compare the price of a product to their bank account. They only compare it to the biggest number fresh in their mind. Your brain is manipulated every single day. Whether you walk into a luxury car dealership, browse a premium course online, or sit down at a contract negotiation, you think you make decisions based on reason and your bank balance. Big mistake. Financial experts and behavioral psychologists know exactly how to control your wallet through a biological loophole. It's called relative pricing. Neurological research shows that most financial choices are made by the subconscious, where logical numbers get totally twisted. You are a target in a rigged game. But starting right now, the tables are turning. The hidden rule of power is simple. Wealth and market manipulation are not about how much money you have, they're about how you control the perception of value. You will transform from the hunted to the hunter by learning how to scientifically make a $75,000 price tag look dirt cheap. To understand why this works perfectly, we must look at the root of human perception. The human brain is not wired to understand absolute value. We have no idea if a $75,000 price tag is big or small. $1,000 service is expensive or cheap until it is placed next to a reference point. In the book Thinking Fast and Slow, behavioral economist Daniel Kahneman proved that the anchoring effect shapes every decision we make. Imagine perception like a ship anchor. Once that anchor drops onto a specific number, your entire train of thought is chained to that spot. Here is the first breakthrough insight. Customers never compare your price to their bank account. They compare it to the last big number they heard. This control system runs on 3 psychological levels, called the decoy anchor system. Picture it as a 3-layer trap. Level 1 is the mega anchor. You drop a massive number into their mind to break down all defenses. This number does not even have to relate directly to the deal, but it must use the same unit of measurement. Major corporations spend millions of dollars every year just handling operational costs like this. When a $1 million figure drops, the client's perception of value stretches instantly. Level 2 is the frustration anchor. You intentionally pitch a terrible option at a high price. You tell them you have a basic package for $80,000, but it completely misses their primary goals, which we can call X, Y, and Z. This is the decoy, designed to be rejected, setting a bad but expensive standard. Level 3 is the closing blow. You introduce your main offer at $75,000. This is where the psychological magic happens. The $75,000 price tag does not stand alone anymore. It sits safely below the $80,000 frustration anchor and miles away from the original $1 million mega anchor. The other side sees a financial relief, a deal they cannot afford to miss. To use this weapon in real negotiations, you must take 3 exact steps. First, talk about the big picture and mention massive numbers from the market to set the mega anchor. Next, present the decoy option that costs more than your main product but strips out the most important features, creating the frustration anchor. Finally, deliver your actual target product at a lower price than the decoy, completely solving their problem. The second breakthrough insight you must remember is this: you are not selling a product, you are selling contrast. The gap between those two numbers is the gravity pulling revenue straight to you. As Morgan Housel wrote in The Psychology of Money, doing well with money has a little to do with intelligence and a lot to do with behavior. In short, the value of a number is just an illusion built by comparison. By combining the mega anchor, the frustration anchor, and the closing blow, you will master any financial negotiation. Your challenge today is to dissect your last 3 purchases to see what numbers anchored you, or apply this 3-step framework to your next pricing email. Stop being the prey and start running the game. Manipulating numbers to make an expensive item look cheap is an art, but the peak of manipulation is making your opponent willingly become your partner in crime, and that is the terrifying power of tactic number 3. Tactic number 3 is infiltration by advice. After years of working and reading deep behavioral studies, I found a chilling truth. The more perfect your product or proposal is, the more the other person wants to find flaws to reject it and shut you down. A trap called the IKEA effect is happening so quietly that your boss or partner can't even spot it. The craziest part is that when you ask them for advice, their ego gets locked in, turning them into a partner in crime who automatically approves your proposal. Why do over 80% of meticulously prepared business proposals get rejected at the final pitch? This is a massive paradox in behavioral psychology. The more flawless your work, the harder people look for mistakes. When you present a scratch-free solution, you are not inspiring collaboration, you are triggering their defense mechanism and auditing instincts. In the book Persuasion, psychologist Cialdini points out a foundational principle called unity. The human brain is wired to protect what it helps create. The biggest mistake most people make when looking for agreement is asking for feedback. Psychologically, the word feedback instantly builds an invisible wall. It positions your partner as a judge grading an exam, while you are just a student. From that high ground, their brain automatically scans for flaws to prove their own competence. You accidentally turn them into a direct opponent. To change the game entirely, you need an advanced behavioral tactic: infiltration by advice. Imagine your proposal is not a finished painting, but an open blueprint. Instead of trying to sell a solution, turn your client or boss into a co-creator of your decision. Here is the first counterintuitive insight you must grab. Asking for advice is not a sign of weakness or incompetence. In fact, behavioral studies show that asking for advice smartly increases your credibility and completely shifts their mindset from an auditor to a partner. This process runs smoothly through 3 core shifts. First, completely erase the word feedback from your vocabulary. When a project is still in its early stages, go to your toughest stakeholder or client and ask them for advice on a specific bottleneck. The moment someone gives you advice, their ego binds to that project. They enter a state of unity, feeling personally responsible for the success or failure of the idea. This is the psychological IKEA effect. People always place a higher value on things they helped build with their own hands. The second breakthrough insight is that the line between advice and commitment is incredibly thin. Once they give you a solution, they can no longer be an outsider looking in. They are now an intellectual investor in your project. Next, weave their exact thinking and phrasing into your final proposal. When you walk into the meeting to pitch, a fascinating psychological phenomenon happens. Your partner won't see your product, they will see a reflection of their own intellect and ego. They won't see a sales pitch, they'll see their own ideas coming to life. And the truth is, nobody has the heart to reject themselves. Your closing rate and approval speed will skyrocket naturally, without any aggressive manipulation. Winning at persuasion is not about proving you're the smartest person in the room, it's about knowing how to harvest the intelligence around you to serve a common goal. This week, here's a small challenge. Pick an important project, find your most influential but difficult stakeholder, and instead of sending a polished report for approval, book a quick chat to ask them for advice on a specific bottleneck. Watch how a fierce opponent transforms into your strongest defender. Do not stop at just building work alliances, because with this fourth tactic, you do not even have to work hard to persuade. The other person will use a triple lock mechanism to chain themselves to your request. This works perfectly for managing employees and parenting your kids. Tactic number 4 is the voluntary identity trap. You think you can force employees to work weekends or tell your daughter to clean the house using raw authority. Wrong again. The voluntary identity trap, which triggers cognitive dissonance, is what actually breaks down resistance. This triple lock mechanism happens so quietly that their defense system never sees it coming. The craziest part is they will willingly do the hardest tasks just to avoid looking like a hypocrite in front of you. Behavioral economics shows that over 95% of human decisions are driven by emotion. But there is an even stunning paradox. We are willing to sacrifice our time, money, and comfort just to avoid looking like a hypocrite to someone else. The human brain craves freedom, yet it willingly steps into mental cages built by its own words. If you think persuading someone to do a tough job requires masterful negotiating skills or a big fat bonus, you are wrong. The ultimate weapon is not the incentive you offer, it is how you navigate their ego. To understand why this happens, we must go back to the foundational principles of psychology. Psychologist Leon Festinger proved the theory of cognitive dissonance, which is the deeply uncomfortable mental stress when a person holds conflicting beliefs or actions. In Atomic Habits, James Clear emphasizes that the most powerful lever of behavior is identity. Once a person defines who they are, their brain treats any action going against that identity as a direct threat to their self-esteem. It causes mental discomfort as real as physical pain. So here's the breakthrough concept. Elite persuasion is not about forcing a new idea into someone's head. It's about activating an identity cage they already built for themselves, making them realize that rejecting you means shattering their own self-image. This system is called the voluntary identity trap. Think of it like a triple lock on a mental safe. If you try to pry it open with pressure or money, the safe locks down. But if you turn the 3 locks in the exact order, they will unlock it themselves and step inside. Lock number 1 activates the ideal self. Lock number 2 secures the confirmation. Lock number 3 ties the knot, attaching your request as the only key to save that identity. Look at how this works in real life. Imagine you're a manager and you need a star employee to handle a high-pressure project over the weekend, something anyone would normally reject. Instead of using power trips or bargaining with cash, you turn lock number 1 by asking an identity-anchoring question. You tell them you always respect them because they are one of the few true leaders with immense responsibility in the team. Then you ask if they see themselves as someone who always prioritizes the growth of the team. Now they are forced to admit their own positive traits because nobody wants to label themselves as selfish or irresponsible. Next, you must stay absolutely silent and wait for lock number 2 to click. They must nod or give you a verbal yes, acknowledging that they want the project to succeed. That single yes is the exact moment the trap snaps shut. Immediately, you move to step 3, tying the knot. You say, "That's wonderful," and because you're a leader who takes responsibility, you need someone with your caliber to handle the shift tonight to keep things on track. You acknowledge it's tough, but tell them they are the only one who can carry this weight. At this point, your employee will accept the task almost 100% of the time. Here's why. Because if they say no, they slide into violent cognitive dissonance. Their brain cannot handle claiming to be a responsible team player one second and turning into a quitter the next. They accept the hard work to protect the identity they just owned. Many people think this technique is selfish manipulation, but in management and behavioral finance, it's actually an efficiency tool built on voluntary action. Morgan Housel, author of The Psychology of Money, noted that the greatest asset of an organization is trust and personal accountability. When you use an identity trap, you're not forcing them. You're helping them close the gap between the ideal person they want to be and their actual actions. You give them a stage to prove their great identity through real work. In short, people always act consistently with who they say they are. The voluntary identity trap wins because it turns your request into their personal obligation to themselves. Your challenge for the next 24 hours is to pick a low-stakes situation, like asking a coworker for a small document or a family member to do a chore. Apply the 3-step formula, trigger the ideal self, wait for that definitive yes, and drop the offer as a natural consequence. Watch their reflex, and you will see the terrifying power of locking down an identity. Apply this voluntary identity trap to get your daughter to clean her room and fold clothes. Instead of using parenting authority to bark orders, which triggers teenage rebellion, lead her into the identity cage with 3 simple steps. Step 1 is activating the ideal self. Choose a great trait you want her to embrace, like maturity or neatness. Tell her you notice she's growing up fast, showing amazing taste and independence. Ask her if she sees herself as someone who loves a clean, organized space to stay focused and keep her Generation Z style sharp. Step 2 is waiting for confirmation. You must stay silent and wait for her to nod or reply. To protect her mature and organized image, she will likely agree and say she hates a messy room too. Step 3 is tying the knot. The moment she confirms, hook the house chore to that identity. Tell her that's perfect, and since she's an organized person who takes pride in her living space, you need her help to fold these clothes and sweep the floor. Tell her this task needs detail-oriented, and she's the only one you trust to get it done right. But be careful. All those identity traps are completely useless if you go up against a shameless person. That's why you must know tactic number 5, a cheap weapon built specifically to hunt down and strip away the freedom of good people. Tactic number 5 is the debt of gratitude trap. A toxic debt of gratitude is quietly planted so deep that your defensive walls cannot see it. The scariest part is manipulators turn your defensive walls into the dam that keeps you hooked. Own kindness and morals into a weapon against you. You think you accept a glass of water, a cigarette, or a compliment just because the other person is polite. Wrong again. It is actually a psychological loan with high interest rates, controlling your boundaries and your next big decision. Did you know a $5 cup of coffee can cost you a $5,000 financial mistake? In behavioral economics, a bitter paradox exists. People can be perfectly rational calculating bank interest, yet completely blind when measuring the hidden interest on an emotional debt. This is a cheap weapon with maximum destruction, designed to take away your free will. Here's why we fall for this trick so easily. It goes back to evolutionary survival. Thousands of years ago, reciprocity was the glue keeping primitive tribes alive. If someone shared a piece of meat with you, you had an obligation to return the favor tomorrow or you got kicked out of the community. This biological trigger is hardwired into your genetic makeup. But here's a counterintuitive truth few realize. The more ethical, responsible, and kind you are, the bigger target you become for manipulators. Psychological predators do not exploit your flaws or ignorance, they weaponize your best traits. They turn your gratitude into toxic debt. Picture your mind as a heavily guarded fortress. The favor trap never attacks with raw force. It acts like a Trojan horse. It hides behind a tiny, harmless act of kindness, like an over-the-top compliment, a cigarette, or a sudden cup of coffee. The moment you accept it, the Trojan horse breaches your walls. Instantly, the manipulator triggers the trap, demanding a favor that is 10 times bigger. This is not a fair trade. It's a toxic loan with loan shark interest rates, disguised as human kindness. To protect your assets and personal boundaries, you must activate a defense process called debt reversal through a two-step mental filter. Step 1 is isolating emotion from transactions, also known as reclassification. The moment someone unexpectedly does you a small favor and immediately asks for something huge, your emotional brain wants to feel guilty if you decline. Right then, use logic to label the behavior for what it is. Tell yourself that this is not a gift, this is not kindness, this is a sales pitch and psychological manipulation. When you call out its commercial nature, your brain snaps out of autopilot and fires up your logical mind. The invisible pressure evaporates instantly. Step 2 is applying the rule of flat fairness. There's no natural law or math formula stating you owe someone a motorcycle just because they bought you a coffee. The exchange rate of relationships must be based on equal value. When facing a manipulator, look them dead in the eye and deliver a calm script to break the trap. Tell them you appreciate the gift and the small gesture, but what they're asking for is outside your capabilities and personal principles. Suggest discussing a different solution that is fair for both sides. Say this with a polite but completely detached tone. By offering a balanced solution, you flip the script and push the psychological weight right back onto them. You're not running from responsibility, you're just establishing an honest transaction. Here's another breakthrough insight standard books miss. Saying no to an unreasonable demand is actually the highest form of respect for a long-term relationship. When you force a yes out of guilt, you build internal resentment, and that resentment will slowly eat away at the relationship from the inside out. Fairness builds longevity, while fake guilt only feeds toxic connections. To turn this knowledge into a reflex, you need real-world practice. Here's a small challenge for the next 7 days. Whenever you receive unexpected help or a tiny gift, pause for 3 seconds before you react. Look closely to see if there's a string attached to that gift. If there is, activate the two-step mental filter immediately. Own your boundaries because your free will is the most valuable asset you own. Tactic number 6 is the ultimate weapon, capable of locking down a massive deal before you even open your mouth. But before we dive into this dangerous strategy, if you want to stop being easy prey, hit that subscribe button right now to arm your brain every single week. Now, let's unpack tactic number 6, persuasion. After analyzing classic negotiation studies at Princeton University, I uncovered a chilling conclusion. 82% of your major financial and business decisions are locked in 5 minutes before the actual discussion even starts. You think you close $1,000 deals because of sharp arguments at the table. Wrong again. The truth is, persuasion, running through attention capture before the meeting, is quietly controlling the entire game. Level 2 is state priming, which transforms the emotional atmosphere. Think of it like adjusting the room temperature. When you direct a partner's focus to comfort or longevity by discussing a vacation, a peaceful space, or a lasting relationship, their brain lowers its defenses, opening them up to collaborative terms. Level 3 is behavioral synchronization, where abstract concepts turn into real action. Let us look at how you use this powerful mental tool like a professional. The process requires 3 specific actions. Step 1. Pinpoint the target mental state you want them to have when they hear your offer. Decide if you want them to feel generous, cautious, or future-oriented. Step 2. Plant the concept seed. Before introducing your core proposal, weave in a story, an image, or a topic that holds that specific trait. For example, if you want to sell a high-cost, long-term financial solution, start the chat by asking about their 10-year corporate vision instead of pitching product specs. This leads to a second counterintuitive truth. Elite persuasion is not about changing what people think, it's about changing what they're paying attention to at the exact moment of decision. Step 3. Deliver the offer right when the priming effect peaks, usually within a few minutes after the target concept is activated. In short, the human mind is a sensitive ecosystem, shaped by what comes right before. Instead of trying to shift someone's mindset with heavy arguments, learn to guide their attention onto the exact ground you prepared. To test the power of this rule, here's a small challenge for this week. In your next email or meeting, before making a request or financial pitch, spend the very first minute talking about an analogy related to growth or security. Do not rush straight into the main point. Watch their reaction, track the results, and you'll see why the masters of the persuasion moment always master the game.